Pleasure and suffering, pleasure and suffering, pleasure and suffering, pleasure and suffering. This is the cycle that most people go through their entire life like a hamster on a wheel. They experience pleasure, a high, and they experience suffering, a low. Pleasure, a high, suffering, a low. Very few people experience true joy. There's a difference between pleasure and joy. Very few people experience true inner peace, true ecstasy, true bliss within themselves. Very few people experience this because mostly it's just pleasure, which comes from the desires of the world, feeding the desires of your flesh, and then suffering, which comes when you don't have those things or when life doesn't happen the way you want it to happen and you resist it. So ultimately, what you have to do is you have to realize that this cycle is the cycle that we all go through if we don't transcend our lower animal nature and tap into our higher spiritual nature. What do I mean by that? Your lower animal nature is represented by the lower half of your body. It's if you want to look at it in the chakra system, this is the best way I found to explain it. It's the lower three chakras, the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus. Now we need these aspects of ourselves, but let me explain a little bit about what I mean here. So the root chakra is rooted in survival. If you're stuck in the root chakra, you're always going to be in the state of survival. And if you're stuck in the sacral chakra, the next one, the orange chakra, you're always going to be in a state of sexuality. And if you're stuck in the solar plexus chakra, you're going to be in a state of ambition, goal-driven, and just wanting to accomplish more and more and more. These are the lower animal nature aspects of ourselves, and they're needed because we are part animal, we're part human. So we have to transcend, or we have to embrace these three, lower chakras before we can transcend to the higher chakras. Now, what are the higher chakras? The higher chakras are the heart chakra, compassion, love for others, empathy. The next chakra, the throat, you can speak your truth. You can speak with compassion. You know when to speak, you know when to keep your mouth shut. Third eye chakra, this is your spiritual connection, your clairvoyance, your ability, your intuition. Crown chakra, this is your connection with the entire universe. This is your oneness, your experience of oneness. So now that we have that foundation laid, the lower animal natures are rooted in pleasure. Therefore, when you have it, you feel good. When you don't have it, you suffer. When you have the smoke, when you have the drink, when you have the partner, when you have the video games, when you have the websites, you know what websites I'm talking about. When you have these things, you feel good. But when you don't have them, suffering. Because this is what happens. They give you this feeling of false joy, of pleasure. It's false joy, and it releases a ton of chemicals in your body. Just for an example, when you're watching the websites, pay attention. Chemicals are being released all throughout your body. When you're playing video games and you win, chemicals are released throughout the body. You get dopamine because you won. When you're smoking, you feel good because chemicals are releasing in the body or entering the body. All of these things are only temporary though. They eventually go away. So it results in pleasure and then it ends in suffering. Everything that is physical in the flesh results in pleasure and ends in suffering. This is why we have to transcend the cycle of pleasure and suffering and tap into the heart, tap into the throat, tap into the third eye, tap into the crown, tap into the higher levels of consciousness. Now, some people will say this is evil, especially religious people. Oh, don't get into all that, that's evil. This is what Jesus taught. This is what's taught all throughout the New Testament. This is what Paul talks about. Not living for the flesh, rather living for the spirit. But it's not expressed in the way of chakras, but it's all the same thing. I've done enough research on not to just speak it and not know what I'm talking about because I heard it from somebody else. No. This is how the human system works. Whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you practice it or not, this is simply how it works. So if you're stuck in the lower nature, you're going to be in a state of pleasure and suffering. But when you transcend, when you rise up, you actually tap into a more spiritual nature part of yourself, which is unchanging. God is unchanging. God is infinite. God is eternal, omnipotent, omnipresent. So if you tap into that, it's unchanging. It's a state of bliss, as they would call it in the Eastern cultures. It's a state of internal joy. It's a state of gratitude for your life. And it doesn't require anything external. It requires simply being. You're a human, which is the animal part, and then you're a being, which is the spiritual part. When you tap into simply being, such as it's said in Psalms 46:10, if I'm not mistaken, be still and know that I am God. When you're in a state of being, you tap into that I am presence. That I am presence is infinite, and that's going to give you true joy and true fulfillment and true love in your life, not just a temporary, false, fleeting sense of pleasure, which most people are only experiencing. Now, how do you actually transcend that though? I want to give you some practical ways, and it can be very difficult because the body has developed chemical reactions and certain neural patterns, neural pathways, your neurons and your literally the chemistry in your body. Let's just keep it simple. The chemistry in your body has been wired in a certain way. You have to rewire that chemistry into a chemistry of bliss, chemistry of joy, chemistry of love, chemistry of peace. Right now, it's wired in a way where when you have the pleasure, you feel good. When you don't have the pleasure, you suffer. So we have to figure out how to transcend that. And the best way I've found to transcend that, this will be redundant for some of you, but some of you just finding my channel, just watch my videos, you need to hear this. Meditation. Sitting with yourself, sitting in meditation, sitting with all your feelings, sitting with the suffering, sitting with the pain, sitting with the negative feelings. You have to sit with these feelings in order for them to burn up and dissolve on their own. Otherwise, you're going to continue to give into those pleasures. You're going to continue to indulge in your lower nature desires, and you're going to continue going like a hamster on a wheel in this cycle of pleasure and suffering until you actually sit with it and face it. I've made videos on this before. You have to sit with the emotions. You have to face them. We've suppressed them. We've suppressed so much, and it has to come up some way. If we continue indulging, then it's not going to come up. It's going to keep, it's going to stay suppressed like a compressed spring. And one day it's going to damage somebody or the people around you or yourself. So meditation is one way. Journaling is another way, writing your feelings down. Another way is finding healthy activities to do. Things that don't necessarily result in like suffering afterwards, such as exercising, working out, going to the gym, getting in shape, staying healthy, eating good foods, taking care of your body, which is the temple of God. You have to take care of this temple so God can dwell in it, and God's going to bring you true joy and true peace. That life force energy within you, once you tap into that, you get out of the mind, you will realize that that true joy and that true peace that you've been seeking your whole life is actually inside of you. It's not going to be found in this pleasure, that pleasure. So I hope this is making sense. If it is, leave a comment down below. It might be redundant. I'm repeating some of these things a few times, but I really want it to stick into your mind. I want you to tattoo this in your brain. So now you have a way of looking at life that you may have not had before, which is called the cycle of pleasure and suffering. And now you have some tools on how to get out of it. So I hope you gained value from this video. There may have been a lot of gaps, some things I missed, some things I didn't mention. If so, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I can make videos on some of your video suggestions. I'll add them to my list. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe if you resonate with me and my energy. And I'll see you in the next video. Much peace and love.